Have you ever wondered how professional sports photographers cover the big games? I'll let you in on all of our secrets on today's episode of
Ask David Bergman.
Hey there everybody, welcome back. Here I am, as always, answering your photography questions right here on Adorama TV. Today's question comes from Roger M, and he wants to know, I see you covered the college football national championship game. I'd love to know what goes into working an event like that with a team of photographers. Everything from gear and positioning on the field to camera settings and getting pictures sent during the game. Cheers. Hey, cheers, Roger. Thanks so much for sending in that question. I do appreciate it, and it's an interesting topic to talk about. Now, right now, it's January 2026, and yes, I just photographed the college football national championship game at Hard Rock Stadium in Miami. I was shooting the game as part of the official college football playoff photo team, CFP Images, which is run by my fellow Canon Explorer of Light, Kevin Girage. Now look, I was a staff photographer at the Miami Herald and a contributing photographer for Sports Illustrated magazine for many years. I've covered multiple Olympics, Super Bowls, the World Series, and lots of other big events. But since I'm primarily a touring concert photographer now, it had been a while since I'd covered a game. So needless to say, I was thrilled when Kevin reached out. I'm from Miami and I went to the University of Miami and they were in the championship game. Go Canes, you'll be back next year. So being back home for a game like that was actually pretty awesome. Now, because of commercial licensing restrictions, I can't show my photos from the game on this channel, but I can dig into my archive and I'll have some Super Bowl images to show along with a good story at the end of the episode. Now, before we talk cameras and settings, let's go over how you get to photograph a game like this in the first place. You can't just decide that you want to photograph a big game. There's this myth that if you have some generic press pass, you can just show up and shoot from the sidelines. Sorry to say, that's not how it actually works. You have to be working for a legitimate organization, something like a newspaper or magazine or a wire service. Maybe you work for the league or a team or something else like that. Those organizations apply for credentials for you, and if they're approved, you get a photo credential that grants you access to specific areas. Now, they're pretty strict about all this, and it does make a lot of sense. Space is limited, and the sideline is a dangerous place to have extra people wandering around. If they just credentialed everyone who wanted shots for their portfolio, it would be a complete mess. Now, there are different levels of credentials. For a huge event like the Super Bowl or the National Championship, there's often a week of credential and a game day credential. The week of credential gets you access to all of the events surrounding the game. Media Day, Fan Fest, concerts, community events, the trophy, the mascots, the marching bands, all of that stuff. And they can be a little more generous with those credentials because the access is spread out across a city and multiple days. Game day, however, is different. Game day credentials are the ultimate goal, and those are very limited. If you're lucky enough to get a pass to photograph the big game, be prepared for a very long day. For a normal regular season game, if I'm working as press, like for the Miami Herald or Sports Illustrated, I like to be in the stadium about 3 hours before kickoff. That gives me time to get through security, get my gear sorted, get on the field, check the light, and just get the lay of the land. I want to be ready when player warm-ups start, which is usually well before game time. For a championship event, it's a whole different level. For the game I just worked, we left the hotel, believe it or not, at 9 a.m. in the morning, and kickoff wasn't until 7:50 at night. The reason is because CFP Images does all of the official photography for the league, so there were things to photograph all day long. It's not just about the game. It's the atmosphere, the build-up, the team arrivals, fans, and anything else to tell the full story of the day. Now, as for where to position yourself when shooting, for a normal game, each news outlet might have one photographer covering the game, or maybe two. If it's one, you're doing everything by yourself. If it's two, you might decide to stay on opposite sidelines. Now, you're allowed to roam up and down the sidelines, except you have to stay out of the team bench areas. It's really up to you where you want to position yourself. You don't want to be moving during a play, so the idea is to get in place, shoot that play, and then move if you want after it's over and before the next play starts. But for a big game, one photographer is just not enough. There's too much that can happen in too many places. With so many photographers, usually the organization will decide to assign shooting positions to each one. We all want to make the photo, so if we were left to our own devices, we'd all be on top of each other in the same spot, and we'd miss any action that went the other direction. If you've got something like 12, 14, 16 photographers, which is not uncommon for something like Sports Illustrated or CFP Images, a typical setup might look like this. You put 4 photographers in the 4 corners of the field. Now that might either be in the back corner of the end zone or up a bit along the sideline. Either way, that's your quadrant, and anything that comes your way, you'd better nail that picture. Then you might also have 4 photographers in front row seats in those same quadrants. Those seats are in the stands and are reserved for media, but the outlets need to actually buy those. Then you should have at least 2 photographers roaming up and down the sidelines to get shots that you can't get from the end zones. It also makes sense to have 2 or 4 photographers up high in the stands. 1 or 2 might be just shooting game action from up there, while another might be roaming around doing wide-angle shots and fan features. That setup means as long as everyone's paying attention, you won't miss anything and you'll have the entire game covered. Now, before I talk about gear, let me remind you that if you've got a photography question you want me to answer, please go to askdavidbergman.com and submit it on that site. If you want to keep up with everything I'm doing, thedavidbergman.com has links to all of my socials, my free email lists, and a ton of educational videos, and also a few discount and affiliate links. And if you're enjoying this video, please hit that like button, subscribe to Adorama's YouTube channel, and go ahead and tap that bell icon for notifications. It really helps us to keep making free photography content for you every single week. Okay, now let's go over the gear. When you see photographers on the sidelines with those big giant lenses, that's kind of the job right there. Back in my Sports Illustrated days, I would always have multiple camera bodies, each with a lens attached, so I'd never have to switch lenses to different bodies during the game. It just takes too long, and you don't want to drop anything in the heat of the moment, especially if it's raining or snowing. Now, I always had an assistant, so I would bring more stuff than most photographers did. My primary lens was the 600mm f4, which is my favorite long lens for football. Depending where the play is, yes, it's a very tight shot, but it's high risk, high reward. And then I'd also have a 400mm 2.8, which is a little more flexible when the plays get closer. I'd have my 70-200 f2.8 for red zone action and a wider lens like the 24-70 or 24-105 for those rare times when a player makes a play right in front of you. Now, I'd usually shoot with the 600, and then I'd wear the wide angle around my neck so I could just pick it up and start shooting really quick without even looking through the viewfinder. When I wanted to use the 400 or the 70-200, I'd hand the 600 to my assistant and get the other lens from them. We'd practice this a few times before kickoff so we could do it smoothly without missing a beat. And needless to say, these big lenses are also both on monopods because there's no way you'd be able to handhold that thing for very long. So you just get used to managing those lenses back and forth. Now, for the game this week, I didn't have the luxury of an assistant, so I didn't bring the 400. I'm shooting with Canon R1 bodies because that camera, it's built for exactly this kind of work. I did notice that a lot of the photographers today had a really great setup because of a new lens that Canon makes, and it kind of changes the game for sports photography. The 100-300 f2.8 is ridiculous, and I mean that in the best way. It's incredibly sharp even when you add a 1.4x teleconverter, and that makes it effectively a 140-420 f4. That focal range is really useful for football because you can cover a lot of action without swapping lenses at all. If you're the only photographer and you have to get every single thing, that kind of flexibility is a great way to go. At the end of the day, it really just depends on if you're working solo or on a team where you can take more risks. Now, as for camera settings, of course it depends on your client, but most photographers are shooting on a tight deadline and editors need images fast. You're not doing any fancy editing, so JPEGs are often the way to go, straight out of camera instead of shooting RAW. Personally, I shoot RAW plus JPEG, so they can get the files really quickly, but I still have the RAWs for future edits. And when you're part of a team, you want the general look of your images to match all the other photographers, so there's no reason to get fancy with any crazy picture styles. I shoot on standard, and also Canon's auto white balance is usually spot on. High ISOs look so good in cameras like the R1 that I don't worry at all about shooting 6400, 8000, or even higher if I need a super fast shutter speed to freeze the action. Fast frame rates also help you capture peak moments, but be careful. There's a fine line between getting the shot and having 30,000 frames to cull through. I also use the automatic pre-capture to get 20 frames saved before I press the shutter button in case my reflexes are a little slow. Now these are all Canon settings, of course, but the other camera brands have similar things, most of them do. I think Canon does it better, but that's how it goes. Now, the last piece of Roger's question, and honestly the one that kind of blows people's minds, including my own, is how photos get out during the game. I'll give you a little history first because it makes the modern setup feel even crazier. Now, back in the film days, newspapers would literally have runners, people who would collect film from the photographers on the field, sometimes as often as every quarter or even more. At the Miami Herald, we had a guy on a motorcycle who'd take that film back to the office and he'd run back and forth all game long. That film was then processed and the best images were printed for the newspaper. For out-of-town games, there were labs and workrooms inside the stadium itself, and you'd pay the Associated Press to process that film for you. Then you'd run it at halftime and scan a few pictures to send in. At Sports Illustrated, for a big game like the Super Bowl, there are legendary stories of Learjets being chartered to take the film back to New York City from wherever the game was. This would happen twice during the game so that they could get pictures into the magazine on time. That certainly was a different era. Now, by the mid-2000s, 2004 or 5 or so, SI was fully digital, but their workflow was still based on that runner mentality. Instead of collecting film, they would pick up the digital cards from photographers during the game and bring them back to the photo room on site, where editors would ingest, edit, and transmit. Today, most modern workflows skip the card handoff entirely. Many pro cameras have built-in networking options, and a lot of big games provide field-level access points specifically for photographers. There are literally just cables sitting on the sidelines that any working photographer can use. Now again, each camera brand is different, but the basic concept is the same. You just configure your camera ahead of time to send either the photos you've tagged as a batch, or you can just go one at a time. Then, during the game, you just plug into one of those open internet cables, you put that into your camera, and send away. For CFP images this week, we had editors on site in the photo room, but you also could have someone working off-site. Maybe they're at home in their pajamas. It's kind of insane that this can be done now. And networking is always a bit more complicated than it should be, and most photographers get help setting it up the first time, myself included. But once it's working and set up, it's just wild. You can shoot a play, select a few frames, hit a button, and then those pictures can be in an editor's system literally in seconds. And if you have the right team behind the scenes, that can turn that post into a social media post incredibly fast. Now, there is Wi-Fi and phone-based workflows. Those do exist. But listen, in a packed stadium, wireless can be slow and unreliable. If you can do it, wired is definitely the way to go. Now, as promised, I wanted to share a cool story about covering Super Bowl 44, which was also in that same stadium in Miami. Let's go back to 2010, and Drew Brees and the New Orleans Saints were going up against Peyton Manning and the Indianapolis Colts. I was humbled to be working for Sports Illustrated with a team of legendary photographers, literally the best in the business. Now, since we had a big team, everyone was assigned positions, and I had a front row corner spot in the first row of the stands. The advantage is that it's really a clear view of the field with nothing blocking you. The disadvantage is that you're just stuck there. If the big plays happen at the other end of the field, you're too far away to make an interesting image, even with a 600. And there's other people on that end of the field who are going to make better pictures than you are anyway. And I hate to say that's exactly what happened to me all night long. It just felt like the good stuff was all down at the other end of the field. I had nothing important, and I was pretty miserable during the whole game. Then things started to pick up. Late in the game, the Colts are down by 7 and they're driving towards my end. I'm thinking to myself, finally, this is going to be my moment. Peyton Manning is going to throw a touchdown right into my corner. I'm going to nail it. It's going to be awesome. Well, he drops back. He throws towards Reggie Wayne right in my direction, and Tracy Porter from the Saints jumps in front of it and picks it off. Interception. Not only does he intercept it, but he takes it 74 yards the other way for a touchdown, all the way down the field. Peyton kind of made a feeble attempt to tackle him, but he was just shoved aside. So my big moment instantly turns into a play running away from me, and I'm watching the photographers in the opposite corner celebrating because they just got the shot of the game. The Saints go on to win the championship, and I'm feeling like I just won't have any photos in the magazine, and I got shut out. Then comes the post-game. They set up the stage for the end of, after game ceremony and the trophy presentation. But from where I was, it really wasn't ideal. They were facing the other direction and they were really far away on the 50-yard line, and I was kind of behind the stage. Now, I thought about walking around to the other side to get in front of it, but since I knew SI had a big team of photographers covering every possible angle, I had the luxury of just staying where I was. If I had gone around to the front, I would have been right next to some of the other guys, so I just did what I could from my position. Drew Brees is up there with his family, there's confetti coming down, and for a moment he lifts his kid in the air. It's a sweet little human moment in the middle of this massive spectacle, but I didn't really think too much about it. I went home, actually I went to my mom's house in Miami, and the next day I get an email from Steve Fine, SI's director of photography. It just says, "Welcome to the club." And I'm like, what now? He tells me I got the cover. I thought it had to be a mistake. I've had Sports Illustrated covers before, but a Super Bowl cover is different. There's only one of those per year. I thought maybe my name got attached to someone else's photos by accident. Then he sends me the cover PDF, and it's my frame of Drew Brees holding his kid with the confetti coming down. The original was much looser, and I almost always shoot horizontals. But the imaging department did a great job pulling out every last pixel to create an iconic Sports Illustrated cover. Look, the story of the big game isn't always the obvious action photo. Sometimes the defining image is the moment that happens when you think you missed everything and you just keep shooting. So to sum up how big games get covered, it would be this. You need legitimate access, which means credentials. If you're working with one or more other photographers, you need structure, which means assigned positions and clear rules. You need reliable gear and simple settings that deliver consistently. And you need a workflow that gets images to editors fast because the whole machine depends on speed. And if you're lucky, you also get one of those moments that ends up living way beyond the final score. Hey, thanks again for the question, Roger. I hope that gives you a real look behind the curtain of what it takes to cover a big game. And thanks to all of you for watching Adorama TV. Hope to see you next time right here on Ask David Bergman.